there. All right. So in Maya environment, when you want to do an animation, so basically you can animate anything or any moves that you do in Maya and keep keyframes of that. So the nature of animation in Maya is based on keyframes, where you down here you have your key slider and also the frame range, and there you can pick in every given frame what are the things that are happening. So you can fix different properties at any frame, and as you go through them, they will transform into each other. So that's the nature of how the animation works in Maya. So up here you have this menu where you can pick the animation and FX, which we're going to talk about today. So first of all, I'm going to go to animation, and you see as soon as I click on that, a few new tools are showing up here for me that I can use. So first of all, down here you have your frame slider, where you can go to different frames, and you have your frame range, where you can decide how much of the overall animation you're gonna see in your frame slider. And then giving these numbers, you can control that. So let's say I want to have a 120 frame animation and just see from 1 to 100. So 1, 1, 100, 120. That's how it works. The other settings you may want to know from the beginning is this little running guide down here. That is your preferences. If you open that, it will go to your time slider settings. So up here you can see a few different properties you can play with, but what is probably the most important is that start and end animation characteristics that you could also change from here. What is the frame count and how many of them you're dealing with. The other thing is the playback properties. So down here you can select your playback speed. Because we will be looking at animations and simulations that we do in Maya, you need to put it on play on every frame so that it can calculate accurately what's happening in every frame. But in real life, when they are producing animation, the default is 24 frames per second. That is what we can see in a movie or an animation. So you can change your speed from there, but I'm gonna put it on play every frame. And then the playback is on free, which is again referring back to the speed, and then we can come back and change it if we wanted to. So that is saved, and that is ready to happen. So just a very basic animation. Let's say we have a sphere and we want to make it move. So we are on frame 1, and you can see the properties that are showing up on frame 1. So whatever is on the screen, if you right click on them, you can key that selected property. So that means if my my sphere is selected and my x translate x number is at, let's just make it -10, and it's on frame 1, and if I right click and key that selected, then always whenever I go back to frame 1, it will read that property. If I go forward to frame 100 and change that to +10 and then keyframe that, then you will see through the animation it's just simply moving from -10 to +10 in the animation. So it is a bit fast. I will go back here, change this maybe to real time, and save and play. So it's a bit slower. I can see what it's actually doing. You can kind of notice that it's not a linear movement that is happening. It's kind of accelerating from the beginning and decelerating at the end. It is kind of a default setting that is set for animation tools, that it does that on a curvature. I'll show you guys how to edit that in the future, but just to know where to access the default is, again, going back to these preferences, I believe up here under settings and animation, you have your tangents. If you maybe uncheck divided or change these into linear, then you would get a linear movement through from beginning to the end, and not really that curvature kind of movement. I'll talk about that a bit more later. But just for now, those are the basics of how to create an animation based on keyframes and the properties that are changed. Any questions so far? No? Okay, good. So a good tip is always go to the frame that is your destination frame and then start changing things. Because if you change something and then you go to the frame, it will mess up how Maya is thinking about your animation. So always go to the frame you want to change, then change your properties, go to the next frame, and then change it again. A shortcut to keying everything in the scene is pressing S. But the problem is that any possible thing on, what is that? Any possible thing on your screen will be keyed at that frame. Let's say you're not changing any rotation and you press S, your S properties is keyed in that one frame. And then whenever later you change that rotation somewhere else, there is a data set somewhere that may mess that. So S will key everything that is put there. But the easiest way is to just right click and select what you want to key on. Again, you can animate everything in Maya. So let's say here I right click on this and I want to do a reduce mesh on it. So I will click my reduce. This will show up and I will put it on 0. So you can see it's on 0. I would right click and say, why it's not doing that? So I'll just use my S, I know. And then I'll go to 100 and change that number to now maybe 95. And then S again. Did something wrong. I pressed something and it disappeared. I have no idea how to get it back.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. If something like this happens, a good solution is always to pause recording, but I'm not gonna do that. Okay, I'll search for it. Slider. No matches. That's S-frame. Okay, display. Okay, seriously, I'm gonna stop recording.